3 years after the incident occurred, a mysterious USB drive found its way into the hands of an elderly woman who couldn't recall how she acquired it. This flash drive contained the most disturbing photographs and video recordings, providing evidence of a horrific offense. It seemed as though fate itself desired for the perpetrator to face the consequences of their actions. Today we'll discuss an Australian case that occurred in 2016. It involves a criminal who toyed with human life, and many might consider him deranged. But is that really the case? Her friends called her Michelle. The girl's full name was Meng Mai Lang. She was born in Chengdu, Sichuan Province, People's Republic of China, in 1991 and attended high school there. When Michelle was in her senior year, her father passed away in 2008. The man perished during an earthquake. The daughter struggled deeply with the loss of her closest family member. This tragedy coincided with her high school graduation and college enrollment. Despite the girl's shattered emotional state, Michelle wept even during exams. She was accepted. She completed a broadcasting course and presenter training at Sichuan University. Michelle was extremely close to her mother, Mai Lang. They were literally dependent on each other, especially after her father's death. However, a couple of years later, in 2011, the young woman left China to continue her studies in Australia. She enrolled at a technology university in Sydney, where she studied economics and hospitality management. Her mother said that Michelle had always dreamed of going to another country. One of the reasons Mai Lang allowed her daughter to move to Australia was because Michelle's aunt and cousin lived in Sydney. The girl settled in her relative's house, where besides her aunt and 18-year-old cousin, her aunt's fiancé also resided. Shortly after Michelle's move in 2012, her 43-year-old aunt married her boyfriend Derek, who was 22 at the time. Initially, they all lived together in a rented apartment, and after the wedding, they were able to purchase their own home in Campsie Town, about 7 miles from Sydney's central business district. Mai Lang, Michelle's mother, made a substantial financial contribution to the property purchase, as her daughter liked Australia and wanted to stay there. The woman was thinking about Michelle's future and wanted to somehow thank the relatives for taking care of her niece. In China, there's a tradition of living as one big family, so the girl remained living with her aunt's family, but now in their own apartment instead of a rented one. Michelle was always very kind, sensitive, and loved cooking, and she also adored everything related to beauty and makeup. The student shared numerous videos on social media about cosmetics, posted many selfies, and photos of her adventures in Sydney. She constantly messaged her family, complaining about how much she missed her hometown and especially her mother's cooking. Michelle got along wonderfully with her aunt, her husband, and her cousin. She shared many joint photos taken during holidays on social media, describing how they had a good time together. In general, her aunt's family was quite peculiar. Apart from the fact that there was a huge age difference of over 20 years between the spouses, the young husband stopped working after marriage. Previously, Derek Barrett worked in the IT industry, but now all financial burdens fell on the woman's shoulders. Michelle's aunt worked in another city, Wollongong, located quite far from Sydney, about 60 miles away. It took an hour and a half to get there, so the woman was absent from home for several days in a row. At some point, to help her aunt, Michelle took on the responsibilities of being the housewife. She enjoyed cooking, cleaning, and looking after her younger cousin, although he was only a couple of years younger than her. Michelle completed a course in hotel management, and in 2016 began studying a translation course in Sydney's central business district. The student had specific goals in building her career and was very ambitious. She managed to combine housekeeping with college studies. Moreover, Michelle was still young, so like any 20-year-old, she simply lived and enjoyed her life. She hung out with friends, went to parties, and always tried to look her best. Friends, over 90% of viewers watch videos without subscribing to the channel. Check if you're subscribed. If not, please be so kind as to subscribe to the channel to support me. Thursday, April 21st, 2016, was an ordinary day. After classes, Michelle met with a friend to go shopping, and although the students didn't buy anything, they had fun trying on various amusing items and taking photos in them. After shopping, around 3 p.m., the girls parted ways at the bus station near the university. Her friend had some urgent matters to attend to, while Michelle decided to continue shopping. She took a bus to a huge shopping center and spent some more time browsing cosmetics and perfume departments. Her movements were recorded by surveillance cameras located in the store. They clearly show that the girl was fine. She was simply enjoying a wonderfully spent time. Michelle reached Campsie Town by train. Arriving at the station at 4:30 p.m., she headed home. That day, her aunt had left for work in Wollongong and was planning to be away for several days. From April 21st to 24, only Derek remained in the apartment, as her cousin planned to stay overnight at a friend's place. Later that same day, Michelle made several phone calls. First, she chatted with her girlfriends, then at 10 p.m., she called her aunt. Around midnight, the student sent a text message with homework to one of her teachers, and after that, no one heard anything more from Michelle Lang. In the following days, the girl's cousin, taking advantage of his mother's absence, only stopped by the house to change clothes and grab a bite to eat. Carefree Derek, in his wife's absence, spent hours lying on the couch in front of the TV or playing computer games. Spending entire nights in front of the monitor, the man didn't even think about where Michelle might have gone. He had no reason to wake up early in the morning, so barely opening his eyes by lunchtime, he assumed his niece had gone to study, and his stepson was old enough to take care of himself. The main thing was that they didn't disturb his rest and enjoyment of life. The young man wasn't particularly worried. Only when a couple of days had passed did he finally realize he hadn't seen Michelle in a while. Derek sent her a message asking if everything was okay, but received no response. On Sunday, April 24th, 2016, around 10 p.m., Derek got in the car and drove to the station to meet his wife, who had just returned home from her business trip. 3 days had passed since Michelle was last seen. The aunt, upon entering the apartment, first asked her husband where her niece was. The woman had called her several times, but she didn't answer. Derek said he had also sent Michelle a message and she hadn't replied. Then the man admitted that he actually hadn't seen the girl for several days. That's when panic began to set in. They rushed to the niece's room and started looking for clues, trying to understand where she might have disappeared to. The couple checked Michelle's computer, her social media, examined the room, but found nothing that could indicate the girl's whereabouts. Deciding that morning is wiser than evening, they only reported the student's disappearance the next day, Monday, April 25th, although no one had seen her since Thursday evening. Derek simply confessed to his wife that he had been sleeping during the day, so he might have simply not noticed Michelle coming home. He hadn't looked into his niece's room or asked where she had been or where she was going. The couple really decided to wait one more night, and if the girl didn't show up, they would go to law enforcement with a report the next day. At the police station, Derek described the situation, explaining to the officers why they didn't immediately seek help. Michelle's aunt added that her niece was a very responsible person. Since the girl moved to live in Australia, she hadn't spent a single night outside the home. Every time she went out with friends, Michelle would let them know where she was going. And now several days had passed as they both unsuccessfully tried to contact her. Several facts pointed to the strange disappearance. Firstly, Michelle's coat, which she usually wore when going out, was left hanging at home in the closet. Secondly, the niece always took an umbrella with her regardless of the weather, but it also remained in the room. Thirdly, her public transport card was also at home. Moreover, Michelle didn't know how to drive, so she couldn't have just gone somewhere by car. After visiting the police station, the aunt decided to inform Mai Lang, Michelle's mother, about the disappearance. Soon, the missing girl's name appeared on all Chinese social media platforms, as someone from the Lang family had written about her disappearance in hopes of getting any information. Michelle Lang's photos were practically everywhere. Relatives wanted the Chinese community in Australia to join in the search as well. Then rumors began to spread online that Meng Mai was no longer alive and that her body had been found. The family was already on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and these false reports were pulling the rug out from under their feet. Mai Lang made a statement urging the public to stop unfounded speculation and not interfere with the investigation, because Michelle could still be alive. At least there was no evidence to the contrary at that moment. A couple of days earlier, on April 24, 2016, around 10:30 a.m., a tourist was walking along Snapper Point Beach on the central coast of New South Wales. Snapper Point is a beautiful beach with stunning views and amazing lookouts. This woman was near Snapper Point Cave, which has a blowhole. In fact, it was a rather dangerous area, as several people had already died there due to slippery rocks. People tried to avoid this place, so it was completely silent. The tourist was enjoying the views, stopping near the cave itself and looking down at the raging sea from the height. Then her gaze was drawn to some object floating below in the blowhole. She became curious about what it was and tried to descend a bit lower to get a better look at the find. When it finally dawned on the tourist what she was seeing, she involuntarily cried out and hurried to move away from this horrible place. Below, a human body wrapped in plastic was floating. The woman immediately dialed the police number and reported the gruesome discovery. Rescuers who arrived at the scene initially thought they were dealing with another accident in this area. Someone had disregarded safety rules and slipped on the rocks. They managed to retrieve the body from the water and only then realized they were facing a crime victim, as there was nothing on the body except plastic. There were also no characteristic marks from hitting rocks. However, several stab wounds and other injuries were found. Identifying the victim wasn't possible as there was no identification on her. The body was completely naked and wrapped in a large plastic bag. The police department generated a computer-aided sketch of the unidentified body, describing an Asian woman aged 20 to 30, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, with short black hair. Detectives also concluded that the blowhole wasn't actually the crime scene where the victim was attacked. This happened elsewhere, and she was thrown here to conceal evidence of the crime. Authorities appealed to the public, urging anyone with information to contact the police. The appearance of this sketch led internet users to believe it was Michelle Lang, so the rumors about her death actually had quite strong evidence. They didn't arise out of thin air, as the missing girl's relatives thought. After receiving the report from Michelle's aunt about her niece's disappearance, detectives pieced together the facts and visited the Lang family that same day. The Chinese student fully matched the description of the victim found in the blowhole at Snapper Point Beach. Police officers told Derek and the aunt about the body found a few days ago and offered to conduct a DNA test to rule out the possibility that it was Michelle. They took her toothbrush, some hair left on her comb, some other personal belongings, as well as her personal computer. Derek and the aunt had heard vaguely about some woman whose body was discovered by a random tourist, but it never occurred to them that it could be their niece. To help with the search somehow, Derek informed the police that Michelle had been spending a lot of time online in recent months, communicating with strangers. She even developed a romantic interest in one guy from online. When he and his wife searched through her niece's social media accounts, they saw correspondence with an Australian boy. The aunt immediately disliked the young man. In the photos, he had an unpleasant expression and a fierce look. It's unknown what could have attracted Michelle to him. After all, judging by the messages, they had been communicating for 2 months. The aunt believed that if this boy had done something bad to Michelle, he would have faced resistance and opposition, because she hadn't had intimate relationships with the opposite sex before. Derek further added that recently Michelle had started partying a lot, going to clubs, drinking frequently, and had registered on several online dating apps. However, this seemed unlikely and didn't match at all with what the girl's aunt had said earlier. Therefore, Derek aroused quite the opposite interest from the police. They asked the man to describe what happened on the day he saw Michelle before her disappearance. It turned out that Derek Barrett was the last person to see her alive. The man said that everything was as usual and nothing foreboded trouble. He and his niece had dinner together, then watched some movie. Around midnight, Michelle went to bed, and after that, he didn't see her. The police found it strange that Derek lived in the same apartment with the girl and didn't notice that she hadn't been home for several days. To which Derek reluctantly admitted that when he was immersed in computer games, he himself could be carried out of the house along with the laptop, and he probably wouldn't have noticed. On April 29, 2016, DNA results were received. Unfortunately, they confirmed that the body in the blowhole belonged to Meng Mai Lang. The girl's mother was devastated and immediately flew to Sydney. The police continued their investigation while Michelle's family tried to comprehend the horrifying news. Detectives were still puzzled by Derek's behavior, so they called him to the station and questioned him again. The man repeated the story he had previously told about the last evening with Michelle. Then, for some reason, he mentioned that he didn't stay at home all days. Once he had breakfast with a female friend. This was on April 24th. Meanwhile, investigators checked surveillance camera footage in the area and noticed a suspicious white sedan entering the national park near Lake Munmora just after 7 a.m. on April 24, 2016. According to police, this happened 4 hours before Michelle's body was discovered in the blowhole. Official data showed that Derek Barrett also owned a white car. His mobile phone, as geodata checks revealed, made 2 calls near the place where Michelle was found. During questioning, Derek denied that it was his car in the video. The image was slightly blurry, and license plates were impossible to make out. So Derek took advantage of this and stated that he didn't even know where Snapper Point Beach was, as he had never been there. It was then that the police resumed the investigation and found surveillance camera footage showing Derek buying drinks at a gas station near the Snapper Point area. Additionally, 2 witnesses were found who claimed they saw Derek at the very top of the cliff, right above the blowhole that morning. They were walking along the rocky shore by the waterline when an unknown man called out to them. He warned the young people to move away from the edge because it was dangerous. After the man left, the young people still crept to the edge and surveyed the area but found nothing suspicious. Michelle Lang apparently had visited the place where her body was later found in the past. As 3 years ago, in June 2013, she posted a photo of the exact same blowhole on social media. Another interesting discovery for the police was that Derek had visited his parents' family home that day, who lived just 8 miles from Snapper Point. He spent his childhood there and knew the surroundings well. So his statement that he had no idea where this place was a blatant lie. After this, the police obtained a warrant to search the apartment where Michelle lived with her relatives and to check Derek's mobile phone. The device had likely been cleaned, as it contained a lot of unplayable information, but experts were able to recover some deleted data, and what they found shocked them. On April 29, 2016, Derek Barrett was arrested for the murder of his niece, Michelle Lang, and the whole horrifying truth came to light. So what really happened on that fateful day? It was believed that the marriage between Derek and Aunt Michelle was one of convenience, not love. Given their 20-year age gap, many people were convinced that the woman sought to obtain Australian citizenship this way. Derek, by providing her this opportunity, could avoid working since his aunt promised to take care of him. Derek wasn't blood-related to Michelle and felt physically drawn to this girl. Age-wise, she was much closer to him than his wife, with only a 2-year difference. Once, the man even confessed to his spouse about his attraction to his niece. He saw her daily for 5 years. As soon as the girl appeared in his aunt's house, all of Derek's intimate fantasies were directed solely at her. He was obsessed and dreamed of one day being in Michelle's embrace. There are men who fetishize Asian women. This is a fairly common phenomenon. Sometimes such obsession ends quite tragically, as happened in Michelle Lang's case. Derek later admitted in court that all his thoughts and hidden desires revolved around his niece of Asian descent. Instead of fighting his temptation, in September 2014, he installed a hidden camera in the shared bathroom. The man didn't just violate the girl's privacy, he invaded it in the most brazen way, watching Michelle when she was least protected, and Derek didn't stop at peeping. He entered his niece's bedroom while she slept, filmed her, and then satisfied his lust in the same room, examining her sleeping body. He then pointed the phone camera at himself and recorded his genitals during moments of pleasure. The man did this not once or twice, but regularly. When no one was home, he eagerly rewatched the videos. It's currently unknown if his wife suspected what he was doing. Judging by the fact that when the media covered this case, The woman tried to conceal her face in photos and her name. For her, it was no less shocking than for everyone else. All these intimate recordings were made on Derek's ordinary old mobile phone, and they were deleted quite recently, after Michelle's body was discovered. It was thanks to these images that detectives understood how obsessed Derek was with his niece. When a person develops obsessive ideas, when they film or photograph someone to later use these materials for self-gratification, it usually doesn't end there. They can no longer stop. They want complete possession of the object of their base passion. The court transcript detailed the events of the night when Michelle Lang returned home after shopping, as this horrifying scene was also recorded on Derek's phone. That Thursday evening, when the girl went to bed around midnight, Derek attacked her. He enjoyed his power over her all night until 8:40 a.m. the next day. Derek tied Michelle's hands behind her back, gagged her, and wrapped her in tape. Then he started taking photos. There were 11 photos in total, and one of them showed a close-up of the girl's face. The fear in her eyes was evident. Other photos focused on her intimate areas, breasts, and close-ups of her genitals. The judge concluded that Derek forced Michelle to position herself so he could photograph her private parts. The last photo of Michelle was taken on April 22nd at 8:39 a.m. Sometime between this final photo and Sunday morning, April 24th, Derek ended the girl's life using a knife. It's believed that until this point, he had simply been torturing her. The injuries on the student's body told the story of the brutal attack she endured. Michelle actually fought back against Derek. The autopsy revealed 31 stab wounds. There were also numerous blunt force injuries and defensive wounds. The final knife wound was to the throat. Although this neck injury was determined to be the one that ended the girl's life, the amount of blood she lost due to the total number of stab wounds could also have caused her death. The blunt force injuries were likely sustained after death from falling from a height and hitting the water. After Derek took Michelle's life, he wrapped her body in plastic wrap and placed it in his car trunk. He left the apartment at 3:19 a.m. on Sunday, April 24th, and went to a gas station where he bought a couple of drinks. Then he drove to the national park at Lake Munmora, climbed to Snapper Point Cave to a vent hole. He pulled his niece's lifeless body from the trunk, stepped over the barrier railing, and approached the very edge. Derek dropped Michelle's body from a height of 20 feet into the exhaust well. He didn't leave immediately because he needed to capture this moment on his phone. The man took about 7 photos of the rock and water below. It's possible he was simply waiting to see if the body would surface. The most chilling part was that on April 23rd, the day before Derek disposed of Michelle's body, he kept her at home as a captive. At some point, he forgot that besides the two of them, his stepson also lived in the apartment. That's when he was startled by the sound of keys turning in the apartment's front door lock. It was Michelle's cousin, returning home from a sleepover at friends. The young man stayed in the apartment for about 3 hours before leaving again. According to him, Derek spent all this time in the bathroom, keeping the shower running. He left the bathroom only once, quickly ran to his room, then halfway turned around and ran back to the bathroom, locking the door again. After a couple of hours, the young man couldn't stand it anymore, knocked on Derek's door, and asked if everything was okay. Derek opened the door just a crack and advised using the other bathroom, claiming this one smelled bad. It was assumed that the man was keeping Michelle inside the whole time. It's unknown whether the student was alive at that moment. If the girl's brother had caught his stepfather in such an act, everything could have ended even more tragically. And then the aunt would have lost not only her niece, but also her son. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this video. It's really important. Later, when Michelle's aunt returned from her business trip, she noticed the apartment was exceptionally clean. The sheets on her niece's bed were washed, floors mopped. The woman was surprised and thought it rather unusual, but she simply dismissed the thought. The second oddity was that several bath towels, a roll of black tape, and a suitcase were missing from the linen closet, and the aunt dismissed it a second time. After a long trip, the woman was only concerned about where her niece had gone, not sheets and towels. Sometimes our minds firmly reject dangerous thoughts that our intuition suggests because we couldn't bear them, couldn't cope. The aunt did have a premonition of an approaching disaster, but she attributed it to worries about Michelle. The police did an excellent job, quickly piecing together the puzzle. Derek was arrested less than 10 days after Michelle vanished. During the trial, Derek confessed to having intimate fantasies about his niece Michelle, and that this led him to install cameras in the shared bathrooms of the family home. Sometimes he used his mobile phone for this, hiding it inconspicuously among men's shaving supplies. Derek also revealed that he often crept into Michelle's bedroom at night while she slept, filmed her, and pleasured himself. The man stated he was certain his wife and stepson would be absent on the days he attacked his niece. However, Derek denied having any intimate contact with Michelle, and there was no evidence that he did. All the police had were photos of the girl bound and gagged. The reason Derek took Michelle Lang's life, according to him, was that he was under the influence of heavy drugs. He allegedly couldn't remember what happened, didn't really understand, couldn't control his behavior at that moment. Derek's lawyer tried to emphasize his client's psychological issues related to his childhood. At the time of the crime, Derek was 27 years old. He had no criminal history but an unhappy childhood. He was bullied and teased at school. He felt socially isolated because of this. In his teenage years, he remained unpopular among his peers, so he immersed himself in computers. During this time, his parents divorced. Later, his mother remarried. The young man dropped out of school without finishing 10th grade. He took information technology courses and then started working in IT. Derek worked there until October 2015, then quit and had been unemployed since, so he didn't stop working immediately after marriage. Until 2012, Derek had only 2 romances. Then he married Michelle's aunt. Initially, the woman wanted children from him, but as she got older, she changed her mind. This led to him feeling rejected again to the point where he started using the services of sex workers and using illegal substances. Because of this, great confusion began in his life. Then Derek told the court that in the week when the crime occurred, he began having memory lapses. He allegedly lost consciousness because at that time, he was spending thousands of dollars on illegal drugs and watching many adult films featuring women of Asian descent. He stated that on Thursday, April 21st, when Michelle was last seen, he took a large dose and was in an uncontrollable state afterwards, as he couldn't remember what happened himself. At one point, Derek claimed that he and his niece had a consensual relationship, as they were about the same age and understood each other well. Her demise was nothing more than the result of an unfortunate, intimate game that ultimately cost Michelle Lang her life. However, during the trial, the prosecution didn't believe a single word Derek said. Judging by the gas station surveillance footage, the man didn't appear to be in any way impaired or under the influence of any substances. On the contrary, he was calm, sober, and composed. A forensic psychiatrist also challenged this fact, saying that the substance Derek claimed to have used typically doesn't lead to memory loss. And if he had indeed consumed the amount he mentioned in his statement, his sexual desire would have decreased instead. According to the doctor's conclusion, the defendant's actions were likely caused by deviant arousal of a violent and sexual nature. Michelle's family, including her aunt and cousin, gave victim impact statements. The aunt felt guilty and responsible for what happened to her niece. After all, it was her husband who took the girl's life, forcing her to endure several hours of humiliation, moral, and physical pain. The defendant himself also made a statement, expressing full remorse for his behavior. He said that Michelle had a bright future ahead, and he took it away. He asked for forgiveness from the family, insisting that his actions betrayed their trust and that he deserves punishment. He felt disgusted with himself. However, Derek's impassioned speech didn't make the impression he apparently hoped for. The judge didn't believe either Derek's sudden amnesia or his deep remorse. I believe the defendant was putting on an act, and for Michelle's family, his actions are unforgivable. On December 15, 2017, the Supreme Court of New South Wales sentenced Derek Barrett to 46 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole after 34 years and 6 months. In 2019, Derek attempted to appeal his sentence but failed. One day in November 2019, a woman went to Strathfield, located 8 miles west of Sydney's central business district, to visit her elderly mother as usual. She saw that the older woman had a flash drive clutched in her hand. Since her mom had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she couldn't remember where she got this USB drive. At first, the elderly lady's daughter thought it was just some trinket, but upon closer inspection, she realized it was a flash drive, so she took it and plugged it into a computer to see what information it contained. She opened a folder and found a video, then pressed play. The recording showed a young Asian woman lying on a bed and tied up, begging for help. Then a man entered the frame and attacked the captive. The camera suddenly fell to the floor and nothing more could be seen on screen. Only sound remained, with the girl screaming for the man not to go crazy and not dare touch her. The frightened woman immediately called the police and reported the shocking discovery. In total, this flash drive contained 13 photos and 9 video files. They were all taken on April 22 and 23, 2016. Of the 13 photos found on the USB drive, 11 were also stored on Derek's phone. The strangest thing is that to this day, no connection has been found between this elderly woman and Derek Barrett. No one knew where she got this USB drive. Strathfield is a 10-minute drive from Campsie, where Michelle's aunt's family lived. Maybe fate itself intervened in this case to restore justice. Derek had claimed in court that he never molested Michelle, and this flash drive seemed like the girl wanted to prove otherwise from beyond the grave. The emergence of new information in the case prompted a new trial, but at the same time, the shocking video on the USB drive finally undermined the health of Meng Mai Lang, Michelle's mother. The heart of the single mother, who had tried her best to help her daughter during her studies in Sydney, couldn't bear the abuse of her adult child. The woman passed away in 2019 when the flash drive was found. But before that, she managed to ask the judge to sentence the executioner and ruthless murderer to life imprisonment. Derek was charged with 9 more counts. He pleaded guilty to all 9. Unfortunately, this had little effect on his sentence. Derek was given an additional 20 years, but they were to be served concurrently with his existing 46-year prison term, meaning the actual term was barely increased. The possibility of parole was only pushed back by 2 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2053, but does a person who took another's life piece by piece, prolonging his victim's suffering, have the right to life? This is the end of the story. Like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments. This was Jeremy. See you soon.